Forgotten civilizations left behind structures that feel completely disconnected from the world around them. Entire temples were carved directly into cliffs and mountains, with details so massive and complex that even modern engineers struggle to explain how they were completed thousands of years ago. Deep underground, hidden chambers and tunnels stretch beneath ancient cities as if they were designed for purposes long erased from history. Some ruins contain strange heat damage, walls that appear partially melted, and construction methods unlike anything seen in nearby cultures from the same era. In isolated deserts, jungles, and remote valleys, these places continue to raise questions because they look too advanced, too ambitious, or simply too unnatural for their time. Archaeologists can study the remains, but many of these ancient mysteries still have no clear explanation. These are the most mysterious ancient sites on Earth where lost knowledge and impossible engineering continue to challenge modern science. Ash and superheated gas swallowed Herculaneum in 79 AD during the catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. Entire buildings vanished beneath volcanic material within hours. Temperatures inside the pyroclastic surges were so extreme that wooden structures instantly carbonized and human bodies collapsed where they stood. Yet inside one buried Roman villa, the eruption created something almost impossible. A hidden library preserved for nearly 2,000 years. Inside Villa of the Papyri, archaeologists uncovered around 1,800 blackened scrolls fused into fragile cylinders of carbon. At first they looked like pieces of burned wood. Some were accidentally discarded because nobody realized they were manuscripts. Others shattered the moment they were touched. Only later did scholars understand the scale of the discovery. These were the only surviving intact scrolls ever recovered from the ancient Roman world. The mystery surrounding the Herculaneum scrolls begins with a scientific contradiction that still fascinates researchers today. Papyrus is an extremely fragile material. It burns easily, absorbs moisture quickly, and normally disintegrates over time. Under ordinary conditions, surviving ancient scrolls are incredibly rare. Yet the eruption that destroyed Herculaneum somehow preserved an entire library instead of reducing it to ash. Modern studies suggest the scrolls underwent a violent process called carbonization. During the eruption, pyroclastic surges moving at enormous speed blasted through the city. Temperatures may have exceeded 300 to 500 degrees Celsius. Under those conditions, organic material should have been completely destroyed. But inside sealed rooms with limited oxygen, the papyrus did not fully ignite. Instead, the fibers decomposed chemically and transformed into carbon while still retaining their original structure. That accidental process preserved the shape of the scrolls while trapping the writing inside them. Researchers often compare the manuscripts to burned hard drives that still contain hidden data. The outside became brittle and fragile like charcoal, but deeper layers remained compressed together. The information survived, yet accessing it became one of archaeology's greatest challenges. For centuries, humans tried to physically open the scrolls. Many attempts ended in disaster. In the 18th century, scholars used blades, heated tools, chemicals, and mechanical devices designed to slowly unwind the carbonized papyrus. Some scrolls cracked apart instantly, others disintegrated layer by layer. Entire passages vanished before they could be copied. Even the most successful methods required months of painstaking work to open only small sections. Large amounts of ancient writing were likely destroyed forever during those early experiments. The deeper mystery was that the texts themselves had become almost invisible. Ancient Roman ink was commonly made from carbon-based materials. After the eruption, the papyrus and the ink carbonized together into nearly identical substances. Under normal light, the letters blended into the background completely. To the naked eye, many scrolls appeared blank even though writing still existed inside them. For generations, scholars believed the unopened manuscripts might remain unreadable forever. Then modern technology changed the situation completely. In recent decades, scientists began using advanced imaging systems capable of looking inside the scrolls without physically opening them. One of the most important breakthroughs came from X-ray phase contrast tomography, an extremely sensitive scanning method capable of detecting microscopic differences inside carbonized material. Unlike ordinary scans, these systems could identify tiny distortions created thousands of years ago by the pressure of a pen moving across papyrus fibers. Artificial intelligence pushed the discovery even further. Because the Incan papyrus had nearly identical chemical compositions, normal imaging methods could not clearly separate the writing from the background. AI systems were trained to detect microscopic texture changes, pressure patterns, and hidden letter shapes invisible to the human eye. Algorithms analysed enormous amounts of scan data, searching for patterns buried inside tightly compressed layers. Eventually, the first hidden letters began to emerge. For the first time in nearly 2,000 years, humans were reading words from scrolls that had never been physically opened. The achievement was considered one of the most important archaeological breakthroughs of the modern era. Researchers were effectively recovering lost voices from the ancient world using machine learning and high-energy imaging systems. This transformed the Herculaneum scrolls into far more than a historical discovery. They became a collision between ancient catastrophe and modern technology. Most texts identified so far appear connected to Epicurean philosophy, particularly writings associated with the philosopher Philodemus. The surviving passages discuss ethics, pleasure, music, emotion, poetry, and the nature of human life. But many historians believe the existing discoveries may represent only a small fraction of what still lies buried beneath Herculaneum. That possibility created another major mystery. Some archaeologists suspect deeper sections of the villa remain unexplored. Others believe additional libraries may still exist beneath layers of volcanic material and the modern city built above the ancient ruins. If true, thousands of unknown manuscripts could still be hidden underground. The implications are enormous because most literature from the ancient world disappeared forever. Historians estimate that only a tiny percentage of Greek and Roman texts survived into the modern age. Countless scientific works, philosophical writings, historical records, dramas, and technical manuals vanished over centuries of war, decay, censorship, and collapse. Entire intellectual traditions were effectively erased from history. The Herculaneum scrolls may represent one of the last untouched archives from that lost world. Some researchers speculate that unopened scrolls could contain unknown works from major classical authors, missing historical accounts, or scientific theories lost for nearly 2 millennia. While many of those ideas remain hypothetical, the mystery continues to drive global attention because hundreds of scrolls still cannot be fully read. At this moment, sealed texts from the Roman world remain locked inside carbonized cylinders waiting for technology advanced enough to decode them safely. The eruption itself adds another disturbing layer to the story. Recent forensic analysis suggests the pyroclastic surges that struck Herculaneum were far more deadly than previously believed. Victims appear to have died almost instantly from extreme heat. Some studies indicate temperatures may have been high enough to vaporize soft tissue within moments. Wooden objects carbonized rapidly. Buildings collapsed under thermal stress. Yet inside that same inferno, fragile papyrus survived in preserved form rather than being erased completely. That contradiction remains one of the most haunting aspects of the entire discovery. The same volcanic force that annihilated city also became the mechanism that protected its hidden knowledge. Without the eruption, the library might have slowly decayed over centuries and disappeared forever. Instead, the disaster sealed the manuscripts inside hardened volcanic layers, where they remained untouched for nearly 2,000 years. For generations, the scrolls seemed permanently silent, blackened, broken, impossible to read. Now machines are beginning to unlock them again. Artificial intelligence, high-energy scanning systems, and advanced digital reconstruction are slowly recovering words hidden since the height of the Roman Empire. Each newly decoded fragment offers another glimpse into a world long thought lost forever. And somewhere beneath the volcanic stone of Herculaneum, unopened scrolls may still remain in darkness. Ancient voices trapped inside carbonized paper, waiting for the modern world to finally hear them again. South of the Ural Mountains, beneath the empty grasslands of the Eurasian steppe, archaeologists uncovered graves that changed the history of ancient warfare. Buried inside the Sintashta tombs were lightweight chariots, sacrificed horses, advanced bronze weapons, and traces of a society that appeared far too technologically organised for its age. The discoveries dated to around 1800 BCE, making them some of the oldest known true chariot burials ever found. The site was first investigated during Soviet-era excavations in the 1970s. Archaeologists initially believed the circular settlements were ordinary Bronze Age communities, but inside several burial mounds they discovered wheel impressions preserved in the soil, paired horse skeletons arranged beside vehicles, and weapon sets placed with ritual precision. What stunned researchers most was the wheel design itself. Earlier ancient wagons used solid wooden wheels. They were heavy, slow, and mainly designed for transport. The Sintashta wheels were completely different. They used lightweight spokes, reducing rotational weight and allowing much higher speed. But spoke wheel engineering is extremely difficult. Every spoke must distribute pressure evenly. A slight imbalance can shatter the wheel during movement. Experimental reconstructions have shown that Bronze Age spoke wheels required highly accurate wood shaping, precise symmetry, and deep knowledge of force distribution. That is why the Sintashta discoveries created such controversy. For a society living on the harsh Eurasian steppe to suddenly produce lightweight high-speed chariots seemed almost impossible. The environment was not rich like Egypt or Mesopotamia. Winters were brutal, resources were unstable, and settlements were relatively isolated. Yet somehow, this culture developed what many researchers consider the first true fast warfare vehicle in history. The graves reveal that these chariots were not ceremonial toys, they were functional machines. Wheel spacing suggests narrow, lightweight frames built for speed rather than transport. The paired horse burials indicate teams specifically trained to move together under control. Archaeologists also discovered cheek pieces made from bone and antler, likely parts of early bridles used for directing horses during rapid movement. Studies on horse teeth from related steppe sites revealed wear patterns possibly caused by bits, suggesting humans were already practicing advanced horse control techniques thousands of years earlier than once believed. This created another mystery. Driving a lightweight chariot at high speed across uneven ground is extremely dangerous. Modern experiments with reconstructed Bronze Age chariots showed that balance and coordination were critical. One damaged spoke could collapse the wheel instantly. A frightened horse could overturn the vehicle. Controlling two horses simultaneously while holding a spear or bow required enormous skill. Yet Sintashta society appears to have mastered this system nearly 4,000 years ago. Some researchers now believe the invention of the chariot was not a slow technological evolution. Instead, Sintashta may represent a sudden military breakthrough. The settlements themselves support this idea. Several Sintashta sites were heavily fortified with circular defensive walls, ditches, wooden reinforcements, and carefully controlled entrances. The famous settlement of Archaeum reveals concentric rings of houses arranged with remarkable precision. Drainage systems controlled water flow through the settlement. Defensive structures surrounded the outer perimeter. Some archaeologists argue these sites resemble organized military compounds more than ordinary farming villages. Evidence of large-scale metallurgy was also discovered throughout the region. Excavations uncovered furnaces, slag deposits, copper residues, and arsenic bronze production areas. Sintashta metalworkers were producing weapons and tools at a scale unexpected for Bronze Age steppe societies. Maintaining the temperatures required for arsenic bronze production demanded advanced furnace control and specialized labor. Some researchers believe this metal industry directly supported chariot warfare. The relationship between metallurgy and chariot construction may be one of the most important mysteries surrounding Sintashta. A high-speed chariot required more than wheels. It required durable axles, balanced frames, strong leather bindings, specialized woodworking, bronze fittings, weapons production, and trained horses. Every component depended on organized manufacturing systems. This suggests Sintashta society was far more technologically coordinated than historians once imagined. The burials themselves add another layer of mystery. Many graves were arranged with extraordinary ritual precision. Horses were positioned in carefully ordered layouts beside the chariots. Weapons and tools were placed according to consistent patterns. Some graves contained multiple sacrificed animals and elaborate offerings. Archaeologists believe these tombs belonged to elite warrior groups who held enormous social power. This may represent one of the earliest known warrior aristocracies in Eurasian history. The rise of these warrior elites may also explain why chariot technology spread so rapidly across the ancient world. Within only a few centuries after the Sintashta burials, chariots appeared across Mesopotamia, Anatolia, the Levant, Egypt, and eventually China. In nearly every civilization that adopted them, chariots became symbols of royal authority and military dominance. The speed of this technological expansion shocked historians. Earlier ancient warfare depended mostly on infantry and slow transport wagons. Chariots transformed mobility completely. A fast-moving chariot could strike quickly, carry archers into battle, and create psychological terror on open terrain. Some historians compare the spread of chariot warfare to the spread of gunpowder in later history. Once introduced, warfare changed permanently. But perhaps the most debated mystery involves the origins of the people themselves. Many scholars believe the Sintashta culture may have been connected to early Indo-Iranian populations. Ancient texts like the Rig Veda contain detailed references to horse rituals, warrior elites, and chariot warfare that closely resemble the archaeological evidence from Sintashta graves. Some researchers argue that steppe groups associated with Sintashta later migrated southward, spreading both language and military technology across Central and South Asia. Thousands of strange carvings cover the dark rocks beside the Riet River in South Africa's Northern Cape. At first glance, Driekopseiland appears to be nothing more than an empty stone field in a harsh desert landscape. But across these rocks are thousands of ancient engravings created by the San people long before written history reached southern Africa. Animals with distorted bodies, strange geometric symbols, human-like figures merging with beasts, and mysterious patterns stretch across the stone surfaces in enormous numbers. Archaeologists consider it one of the largest concentrations of petroglyphs in southern Africa. Yet the real mystery is not how many carvings exist. It is why they were created in the first place. The site gained major archaeological attention during the 20th century when researchers realized the markings were deliberate engravings rather than natural fractures in the rock. Ancient artists used stone tools to repeatedly strike the dark surface layer, exposing lighter rock underneath. This technique created powerful visual contrast without cutting deeply into the stone itself. What immediately shocked researchers was the density of the carvings. Instead of isolated images scattered randomly, the engravings appeared in concentrated clusters spread across large sections of exposed rock. This suggested Driekopseiland was not a temporary stop or ordinary campsite. It may have been one of the most important ceremonial gathering places used by ancient San communities over thousands of years. One of the greatest mysteries surrounding the site is the extraordinary preservation of the engravings. The Northern Cape experiences extreme environmental conditions. Temperatures can rise dramatically during the day and fall sharply at night. Flooding periodically strikes the river system, while constant wind pushes abrasive sand across exposed surfaces. Under these conditions, shallow carvings should gradually disappear. Yet many engravings remain surprisingly sharp despite being exposed for thousands of years. Geologists studying the rocks discovered that the sand carefully selected surfaces covered in dark mineral patina. By removing only this thin outer layer, they created bright images without weakening the rock beneath. The technique allowed the carvings to survive far longer than expected. Similar preservation methods appear at other ancient rock art sites around the world, including altar rock carvings, where mineral-coated stone surfaces also helped preserve carvings for millennia. But at Driekopseiland, the scale of survival remains astonishing considering the brutal climate. The carvings themselves are even stranger. Most images depict animals, especially eland antelope, one of the most spiritually significant animals in San culture. But these are not normal representations of wildlife. Many creatures appear distorted. Some have unnaturally stretched necks. Others seem partially human. Several appear twisted or bent into impossible positions. Early archaeologists assumed the engravings were simple hunting records. Modern research completely changed that interpretation. Anthropologists studying San spiritual traditions discovered that many carvings closely resemble visions described during trance rituals. In these ceremonies, shamans entered altered states of consciousness through dancing, chanting, exhaustion, and rhythmic breathing. Participants later described seeing geometric flashes, transforming animals, and sensations of leaving the physical world. Researchers began realizing the distorted carvings at Driekopseiland may not represent ordinary reality at all. Instead, they may be visual records of supernatural visions experienced during trance states. This theory explains why so many figures appear surreal. Human and animal forms blend together repeatedly across the site. Some figures appear to be transforming mid-motion. Others display rigid body positions associated with trance dancing observed in San ritual traditions. Similar imagery appears at Tasili Naja, where mysterious hybrid beings and distorted figures led researchers to similar conclusions involving altered consciousness and ritual practices. At Driekopseiland, the same symbolic system may have existed thousands of years ago. Some carvings become even stranger when viewed under changing sunlight. Certain figures were placed on curved or angled rock faces where shadows shift dramatically throughout the day. In morning light, some images suddenly become visible while others nearly vanish. As the sun moves, entirely different carvings emerge from the stone. Researchers suspect this was intentional. The San may have deliberately positioned engravings to interact with natural light during ceremonies. If true, the rocks functioned almost like an ancient visual system where images appeared and disappeared depending on time and viewing angle. The location of Driekopseiland raises another major mystery. Many San rock art sites are hidden deep inside caves or isolated cliffs. Driekopseiland is different. It lies directly beside an important water source. In an environment where survival depended heavily on water access, this location would have attracted people from large surrounding regions. Archaeologists believe seasonal gatherings may have occurred here for thousands of years. Different San groups could have travelled to the river for ceremonies, trade, healing rituals, and spiritual events. This would explain why the site accumulated such enormous numbers of engravings over time. Among the animal carvings are symbols researchers still cannot explain. Zigzag lines, circular shapes, abstract patterns, and strange footprints appear throughout the site. Some researchers believe these symbols may represent maps, water routes, or ritual pathways. Others think they are connected to neurological phenomena experienced during trance states. Modern neuroscience has shown that humans experiencing altered consciousness often see repeating geometric forms known as entoptic patterns. Many symbols at Driekopseiland strongly resemble these naturally generated visual effects. If correct, the carvings may represent one of the oldest surviving attempts to record internal psychological experiences rather than physical events. Dating the engravings remains extremely difficult. Unlike bones or charcoal, petroglyphs contain almost no organic material for radiocarbon dating. Archaeologists must estimate age using weathering patterns, mineral buildup, and nearby archaeological evidence. Some carvings may be several thousand years old, but researchers suspect parts of the site could be far older. Because new engravings were likely added generation after generation, the site may represent continuous ritual activity spanning immense periods of time. Another mystery involves the specific rocks chosen for carving. Not every surface was used. The sand consistently selected smooth, dark stones with highly visible mineral coatings. Some researchers also noticed that several engraved rocks produce resonant sounds when struck. This led to controversial theories that sound may have played a role during ceremonies. In many ancient cultures, echoing stones and resonant surfaces were associated with spiritual power or communication with supernatural realms. While impossible to confirm completely, the idea adds another layer to the mystery surrounding the site. What makes Driekopseiland so fascinating is that it challenges modern assumptions about prehistoric societies. The sand did not leave behind massive temples, metal machines, or written records. Yet the carvings suggest an advanced understanding of symbolism, psychology, ritual experience, and environmental interaction. The site demonstrates that ancient humans were capable of creating deeply complex spiritual systems long before organized civilizations emerged elsewhere in the world. The engravings were not random decorations. They were part of something much larger, a ritual landscape shaped over countless generations. The repeated animal transformations, geometric visions, and carefully chosen stone surfaces all point toward a belief system centered around altered consciousness and communication with unseen forces. On the freezing Altiplano of western Bolivia, nearly 13,000 feet above sea level, stands one of the strangest surviving structures in South America, Iglesia de Curahuara de Carangas. From the outside, the church appears simple and fragile. Thick adobe walls rise from the dry earth beneath a sky filled with dust and freezing wind. Nothing about the exterior suggests that inside exists one of the most mysterious mural complexes in the Americas. Every wall, ceiling, arch, and corridor is covered in paintings more than 400 years old. Historians later called it the Sistine Chapel of the Andes. But unlike the Vatican, this masterpiece was built in one of the harshest environments imaginable. The church stands in a region where temperatures swing violently between day and night. Ultraviolet radiation is extremely intense, and adobe structures normally deteriorate rapidly over time. Yet the murals survived, and the deeper researchers studied them, the stranger they became. The church was built during the late 16th and early 17th centuries as Spanish colonial forces expanded across the Andes. Missionaries introduced Christianity into Aymara territory and constructed churches across the highlands. But Curahuara became different from almost every other colonial church in the region. because much of the artwork appears to have been created by indigenous Aymara artists themselves. That created a visual anomaly. The paintings contain Christian scenes, angels, saints, biblical stories, heaven, hell, and the final judgment. But hidden inside them are details that do not fully belong to European religious art. Certain figures possess indigenous facial structures. Some decorative elements resemble older Andean sacred patterns. Local animals and symbols appear inside scenes that should have followed strict European traditions. One of the most discussed examples appears in a depiction of the Last Supper, where a guinea pig, a sacred and important Andean food source, seems to replace the traditional lamb associated with European Christianity. To historians, this raised an unsettling possibility. The murals may not simply represent colonial religious teaching. They may represent a hidden fusion between Christianity and older indigenous belief systems that Spanish authorities attempted to erase. Across the Andes, the Spanish Empire systematically destroyed native temples and spiritual centers. Ceremonial sites were replaced with churches, and indigenous rituals were banned. Yet archaeologists repeatedly discovered evidence that native populations quietly embedded their own symbols into officially Christian art. Curahuara may be one of the clearest surviving examples of this hidden resistance. Inside the murals, researchers identified solar imagery connected to older Andean cosmology. Certain geometric designs resemble sacred textile patterns used long before European arrival. Some symbolic arrangements appear closer to indigenous visual storytelling traditions than to classical European church compositions. This transformed the church into something far more mysterious than a religious building. It became a coded archive. But the greatest mystery may be technological. The murals should not still exist. At nearly 4,000 meters above sea level, Curahuara experiences some of the harshest environmental conditions in South America. Ultraviolet radiation at this altitude is dramatically stronger than at sea level and normally destroys exposed pigments over long periods of time. Temperatures shift rapidly between intense sunlight and freezing nights. Seasonal moisture slowly destroys adobe structures from the inside. Across Latin America, countless colonial murals faded centuries ago under far less severe conditions. Yet many of the colours at Curahuara remain remarkably visible. Reds, blacks, yellows and earth tones still cover large portions of the walls, despite more than 4 centuries of exposure. Researchers believe indigenous artists may have used highly stable mineral pigments extracted directly from local geology. Iron oxides likely produced durable reds and yellows, while carbon compounds created deep blacks resistant to fading. Some conservation experts suspect the pigments were combined with organic binding materials derived from plants, cactus extracts, animal glues or egg mixtures. But even today, restorers struggle to fully replicate the durability of the original surfaces. That problem appears repeatedly across ancient civilizations. At Bonampak, Maya murals survived jungle humidity that should have destroyed them centuries ago. The frescoes of Sigiriya retained colour despite tropical exposure. In the Ajanta caves, pigments remained visible for over 1,000 years. Again and again, archaeologists encounter ancient painting technologies whose long-term stability modern conservation science still struggles to completely understand. Curahuara belongs to that same category of unexplained preservation. The structure protecting the murals is equally mysterious. The church was constructed largely from adobe, sun-dried earth mixed with organic material. Adobe architecture is highly vulnerable to water infiltration, cracking, and collapse. Yet the building survived centuries of extreme environmental stress in one of the harshest climates on Earth. Its survival suggests advanced environmental engineering hidden inside what appears to be a simple earthen structure. The walls are unusually thick, helping stabilize internal temperatures and reduce moisture fluctuation. Natural airflow inside the building likely helped control humidity levels that otherwise would have destroyed the murals from within. The geometry of the structure distributes pressure efficiently across the adobe mass, reducing structural failure over time. Many ancient civilizations developed similar passive climate control systems long before modern engineering existed. Persian yakchals preserved ice in desert heat. Pueblo settlements regulated temperature through airflow and wall thickness, and ancient Andean civilizations learned to manipulate thermal behavior using earth, stone, and altitude. Curahuara may represent a fusion between European colonial architecture and older indigenous environmental knowledge refined over centuries in the Andes. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the church is psychological. The interior is overwhelming. Every direction is covered with imagery. Saints, angels, demons, judgment scenes, symbolic patterns, and biblical narratives surround the viewer completely. The ceiling itself seems to descend under layers of painted figures. Historians believe this immersive environment was intentional. Many indigenous converts could not read Spanish or Latin texts, so the murals functioned as a visual system designed to communicate fear, morality, punishment, salvation, and religious authority through images alone. In effect, the church became a 17th century psychological machine. Some historians believe the church was built atop an earlier sacred indigenous location, following a pattern repeated throughout colonial Latin America. Spanish authorities frequently constructed churches directly over native ceremonial centers in order to absorb symbolic power while erasing older religions. Yet in many regions, the original spiritual meaning of those places never disappeared completely. That possibility changes the meaning of the murals entirely. Perhaps the Aymara artists were not simply decorating a colonial church. Perhaps they were secretly preserving fragments of a disappearing worldview inside the very structure meant to replace it. Off the coast of Tanzania, surrounded by the warm waters of the Indian Ocean, the forgotten stone city of Kua ruins still stands in silence beneath tropical vegetation and collapsing coral walls. At first glance, the site appears similar to many abandoned coastal ruins scattered across East Africa. But archaeologists quickly realized Kua was hiding something far more unusual. Beneath the broken mosques, ruined houses, and eroded pathways was evidence of an ancient maritime civilization whose engineering knowledge and global influence were far beyond what historians once believed possible for the region. Kua was part of the Swahili civilization that flourished along the East African coast between roughly the 10th and 16th centuries. The city rose to power through Indian Ocean trade, connecting Africa with Persia, Arabia, India, and China. Excavations uncovered imported Chinese porcelain, Islamic coins, Persian glassware, and luxury ceramics buried among the ruins. These discoveries confirmed that Kua was not an isolated settlement. It was deeply connected to one of the largest international trade systems in the medieval world. But trade alone is not what makes Kua mysterious. The true mystery begins with the city itself. Most settlements in tropical East Africa during this period relied heavily on wood, mud brick, and temporary materials vulnerable to humidity and decay. Yet Kua was constructed using massive blocks of coral stone cut directly from ancient reef formations. Even after centuries of tropical storms, salt air, monsoon rains, and coastal erosion, parts of these structures still remain standing. Archaeologists studying the ruins became increasingly fascinated by how durable the city's engineering actually was. The builders used fossilized coral limestone known as a coral rag When first extracted, the material was soft enough to shape with relatively simple tools, but once exposed to air, the coral hardened over time into a surprisingly resilient construction material. The technique allowed the Swahili builders to create large permanent structures in an environment where most architecture usually disappeared within centuries. Yet the coral blocks alone were not enough to explain the city's survival. Researchers discovered that Kua's builders also used a highly advanced lime mortar created from burned coral and shell materials. The mortar resisted cracking despite constant exposure to humidity, salt, and intense heat. In modern coastal environments, concrete structures often begin deteriorating after only decades due to saltwater penetration. Some walls at Kua survived for over 500 years. The exact production methods remain partly unknown. Archaeologists believe the coral was heated at carefully controlled temperatures before being processed into lime. Some researchers suspect organic compounds or plant-based additives may have been mixed into the mortar to improve flexibility and resistance against moisture. Similar mysteries surround Roman marine concrete, which also became stronger over time through chemical reactions with seawater. But unlike Roman concrete, the Swahili formulas used at Kua were adapted specifically for tropical marine conditions. The mystery becomes even more impressive inside the city's mosques. Several religious structures at Kua were engineered with thick coral walls, narrow ventilation openings, and carefully aligned interiors. These buildings naturally regulated temperature despite the intense coastal heat outside. Even without modern technology, the structures functioned almost like passive cooling systems. Archaeologists studying airflow patterns believe the builders understood how to manipulate ocean breezes to reduce indoor temperatures naturally. This level of environmental engineering should not have existed in what older historians once dismissed as a peripheral civilization. But Kua continued to challenge assumptions. The houses of wealthy merchants revealed complex urban planning rarely associated with medieval East Africa in older academic models. Excavations uncovered multi-room stone residences with internal courtyards, decorative niches, drainage systems, and imported luxury goods. Some architectural elements showed Persian influence, while others reflected local African traditions. Instead of being a copy of foreign cultures, Kua appeared to represent a sophisticated fusion of African, Arab, and Persian engineering knowledge. Then archaeologists uncovered evidence pointing towards something even more extraordinary. Kua's survival depended entirely on the Indian Ocean. To maintain trade with Arabia, India, and Asia, Swahili merchants needed extremely precise knowledge of monsoon wind systems. Ships crossing the Indian Ocean could not travel randomly. The timing had to be exact. Seasonal winds changed direction during different parts of the year, allowing merchants to sail eastward during one season and return westward during another. Missing the timing could strand ships for months or destroy entire trade expeditions. This required advanced maritime knowledge far beyond simple coastal fishing. Sailors operating from cities like Kua likely understood ocean currents, seasonal weather cycles, astronomical navigation, and long-distance route coordination with remarkable precision. Some historians compare the sophistication of Indian Ocean navigation to Polynesian open ocean navigation systems in the Pacific, yet almost none of the technical knowledge survived in written local records. That absence created one of the greatest mysteries surrounding the Swahili civilization. How did an East African maritime culture sustain a massive international trade network for centuries while leaving behind so few detailed technical texts explaining how it functioned? Most surviving accounts about the Swahili coast came from outsiders, Arab travelers, Persian merchants, and later Portuguese chroniclers. The voices of the Swahili engineers, navigators, and builders themselves are largely missing from history. For many years, colonial historians used this absence to argue that Advanced urban culture on the East African coast must have originated mainly from foreign settlers. Some even claimed African societies could not have independently created such cities. Modern archaeology has almost completely destroyed that theory. Genetic studies, architectural analysis and excavation evidence now show that Swahili civilization emerged primarily from African populations while absorbing influences from across the Indian Ocean world. Kua was not a foreign colony. It was part of a powerful African maritime civilization, capable of competing within global trade networks centuries before European colonial expansion. This realization transformed the ruins into something far more important than a forgotten coastal city. Kua became evidence that entire chapters of African technological history had been misunderstood, and yet despite its sophistication, the city eventually collapsed. By the 16th century, major changes were spreading across the Indian Ocean. Portuguese fleets entered East African waters and violently disrupted older trade systems that had operated for centuries. Traditional commercial routes weakened as European powers attempted to dominate maritime commerce. Some historians believe Kua declined because the regional economy shifted elsewhere. Others point toward political instability, competition between coastal city-states, or environmental degradation caused by overuse of local resources. Rising coastal erosion may also have damaged infrastructure over time, but archaeologists still cannot fully explain why the city was abandoned. Unlike Pompeii, Kua did not vanish in a single catastrophic disaster. There was no volcanic eruption, no giant fire, no sudden destruction layer frozen in time. Instead, the city appears to have faded slowly from importance while the surrounding environment gradually consumed it. This slow disappearance may actually make the mystery even more disturbing. Civilizations often disappear not through sudden apocalypse, but through gradual collapse that leaves little trace behind. Trade networks weaken, political systems fragment, technical knowledge stops being transferred between generations, buildings decay, ports become silent, and eventually entire societies vanish so completely that later civilizations barely remember they existed. At the northern edge of Yemen's Al Jawf Desert, the ruined city of Baraqish rises from the sand behind enormous stone walls that were never supposed to survive this long. The city was once one of the major centers of the ancient Minoan kingdom, a civilization that controlled part of the legendary frankincense route more than 2,000 years ago. Today, most of the world barely remembers the Minoans existed, but the ruins they left behind suggest they mastered engineering, water control, and desert survival at a level that still confuses archaeologists. The first major excavations revealed that Baraqish was not a simple desert settlement. It was a heavily fortified commercial city designed with extraordinary precision. Massive limestone walls surrounded the city for nearly 2 kilometers, reinforced by dozens of defensive towers. Even after centuries of erosion, warfare, earthquakes, and brutal temperature shifts, large sections of these walls are still standing. That immediately raised questions. Ancient desert environments are among the worst possible places for long-term stone preservation. Daytime temperatures expand stone. Cold nights contract it. Wind-driven sand slowly erodes exposed surfaces like sandpaper for centuries. In most ancient desert cities, walls eventually crack apart, weaken and collapse, but Baraqish endured. Researchers studying the masonry discovered that many stone blocks were cut with unusually high precision. Some joints remained tightly connected despite thousands of years of environmental stress. In several surviving towers, the weight distribution appears intentionally layered so pressure could spread across multiple structural points instead of concentrating in one area. This reduced cracking and improved long-term stability. The mystery becomes even stranger when considering the tools available at the time. The Minoans lived in one of the harshest environments in Arabia, long before modern engineering equipment existed. yet they constructed fortifications durable enough to survive longer than many later medieval structures built with superior technology. Archaeologists comparing Baraqish to other ancient fortified cities notice similarities with defensive systems seen in Persia and parts of the Hellenistic world. But Baraqish was isolated deep within the Arabian trade networks. This raises the possibility that ancient South Arabian engineering traditions were far more advanced and influential than historians once believed. But the walls were only protecting something even more important: water. The greatest mystery surrounding Baraqish is how a large urban centre survived for centuries in a region with extremely limited rainfall and no major permanent river nearby. A city dependent on large caravan traffic should have consumed enormous quantities of water. Humans required it, animals required it, trade operations required it. Yet the environment surrounding Baraqish appears almost completely hostile to long-term urban survival. Excavations revealed a hidden system beneath the city. Archaeologists discovered wells, underground reservoirs, storage chambers, and carefully designed water collection systems capable of preserving water for long periods under extreme heat. Some reservoirs were built deep enough to reduce evaporation, while surrounding stone structures helped stabilize temperature. Certain channels appear designed to collect sudden runoff from rare desert storms before the water disappeared back into the surrounding terrain. This was not primitive survival. It was environmental engineering. Researchers began comparing Baraqish to Petra and Jordan because both civilizations appear to have mastered desert hydrology centuries before modern technology. But while Petra carved elaborate channels through mountains and cliffs, Baraqish created a fortified urban water network hidden within defensive architecture itself. Water here was treated like a strategic resource. Every part of the city depended on controlling it. That control transformed Baraqish into one of the major economic centres of ancient Arabia. The city stood along the frankincense route, one of the most profitable trade systems in the ancient world. Caravans transported frankincense and myrrh across Arabia toward Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Mediterranean. These substances were not ordinary luxury goods. In antiquity, they were essential for religious rituals, embalming ceremonies, medicine, and royal temples. Some historical records suggest their value rivaled precious metals. This created another major archaeological mystery. How did enormous caravans cross thousands of kilometers of empty desert with almost no permanent roads? Researchers believe astronomy may have played a central role. Inside Baraqish stood the Temple of Nakre, one of the city's most important religious structures. Archaeologists noticed that parts of the temple and surrounding architecture may align with solar movement and seasonal positioning. Some experts suspect the inhabitants used astronomical observation not only for religion, but also for navigation and trade coordination. In the ancient Arabian desert, stars were survival technology. Without reliable navigation systems, caravans depended heavily on celestial positioning to move between trade centres. A mistake in direction could kill an entire caravan through dehydration and exposure. This means Baraqish may have functioned as far more than a trading city. It may have been a navigation hub where religion, astronomy, and commerce merged into one system. The inscriptions discovered throughout the city strengthened this theory. Hundreds of Minoan inscriptions were found carved into stone across Baraqish. Many recorded trade operations, religious dedications, taxes, and political authority. They revealed that the city maintained highly organized economic systems connected to multiple regions across Arabia. But many inscriptions remain difficult to fully interpret. Some references point to trade structures and administrative system historians still do not completely understand. Others mention rulers and networks almost entirely absent from later historical records. The deeper archaeologists studied the inscriptions, the clearer one fact became. Ancient South Arabia was once far more sophisticated than most historians previously imagined. Baraqish was not isolated. It belonged to a larger civilization capable of large-scale logistics, long-distance trade management, advanced construction, organized writing systems, and environmental adaptation in one of the harshest climates on Earth. Then the city disappeared. Archaeological evidence suggests Baraqish declined slowly as the ancient trade world changed. Sea-based trade routes became more efficient than dangerous overland caravan systems. Economic power shifted away from desert networks. Maintaining large water systems in extreme climates became increasingly difficult. Political instability likely weakened regional control as surrounding powers rose and collapsed. Eventually the caravans stopped coming, and once trade died, the city began dying with it. This pattern appears repeatedly across ancient civilizations. Petra declined after trade routes shifted. Palmyra weakened after losing strategic economic importance. Angkor struggled when environmental systems collapsed. In each case, the survival of the civilization depended entirely on maintaining highly complex infrastructure networks. When those systems failed, the cities followed. But Baraqish never fully vanished beneath the desert. Its towers still stand above the sand today. Massive sections of wall still dominate the landscape. Temple ruins still preserve traces of inscriptions carved by people who disappeared from history thousands of years ago. And perhaps the most chilling part of the story came in modern times. After surviving ancient warfare, environmental destruction, and centuries of abandonment, parts of Baraqish suffered damage during modern conflict in Yemen. Structures that had resisted the desert for over 2 millennia were suddenly threatened by modern weapons and explosions. Archaeologists described the destruction as tragic because many damaged sections had survived almost intact since antiquity. The irony was impossible to ignore. Ancient engineers built walls capable of surviving thousands of years of desert erosion. Modern civilization nearly destroyed them within decades. In the desert valleys of southern Peru, archaeologists uncovered a burial so well preserved that it seemed almost impossible. Inside the ancient chamber sat the remains of a powerful woman surrounded by ceremonial vessels, woven fabrics, metal ornaments, and symbols connected to the mysterious Tiwanaku civilization. The site would become known as the tomb of Chirimaya Tuimiya. But the deeper researchers investigated the tomb, the stranger it became. Textiles nearly 1,000 years old still carried visible colour. Human hair survived in the dry chamber. Metal objects showed levels of precision difficult to explain for a civilization without iron technology. And perhaps most mysterious of all, the burial suggested that Tiwanaku influence had spread across enormous distances through some kind of sophisticated political and religious network long before the rise of the Inca Empire. The tomb was discovered in Peru's Moquegua Valley during archaeological excavations connected to Tiwanaku settlements. Researchers immediately understood the burial belonged to someone of extraordinary importance. The woman had been wrapped in multiple layers of fine textiles and buried with elite ceremonial objects, including karu, drinking vessels, ritual ornaments, woven bags, and decorated ceramics. What shocked archaeologists most was the preservation. Southern Peru's extreme arid climate had effectively sealed the chamber for centuries. Organic materials that normally decay rapidly had survived in remarkable condition. The tomb became one of the clearest surviving records of elite Tiwanaku culture ever found outside the civilization's central homeland near Lake Titicaca. One of the greatest mysteries surrounding Chirimaya Tuimiya is the identity of the woman herself. Ancient elite burials throughout the Andes often belong to rulers, priests, military leaders, or political authorities. But this tomb challenged traditional assumptions because the burial belonged to a woman placed at the center of what appeared to be an extremely powerful ceremonial role. The quantity and quality of the grave goods suggested enormous status. In Andean civilizations, fine textiles were considered one of the highest symbols of wealth and power. Producing elite fabrics required specialized labor, rare materials, and advanced weaving knowledge passed down over generations. Some Andean textiles contain thread counts so high that researchers compare them to later industrial-era weaving precision. The burial raised a major archaeological question. Was this woman a noble connected to Tiwanaku elites? Or did she hold direct political or religious authority herself? Some researchers believe she may have been a high priestess responsible for ceremonial rituals tied to agriculture, astronomy, or regional governance. Others argue she represented a Tiwanaku ruling class that controlled distant territories through local elites, rather than direct military conquest. If true, the tomb could completely change modern understanding of power structures in ancient Andean civilization. The textiles inside the tomb remain among the most mysterious discoveries ever associated with Tiwanaku culture. Even after centuries underground, many fabrics retained visible color and intricate geometric detail. Ancient Andean textile production was extraordinarily advanced. Some weaving methods used interlocking techniques so precise that reproducing them by hand today requires immense skill and patience. The consistency of the thread tension across large sections of fabric suggests highly trained specialists worked on the textiles for long periods of time. The dyes themselves remain partially unexplained. Red pigments likely came from crushed cochineal insects, while yellows, blacks and browns were created from minerals and plants native to the Andes. Yet the long-term durability of the colours continues to surprise researchers. Even accounting for the dry desert conditions, many experts believe the original dye chemistry was far more sophisticated than previously assumed. Some textile fragments also carried geometric patterns connected to Tiwanaku religious symbolism. Similar designs appear hundreds of kilometers away near monumental Tiwanaku temples, suggesting a massive cultural network capable of spreading identical symbols across distant regions without written language. The fabrics were not simply clothing. They were symbols of status, religious identity, and political control. Perhaps the most difficult mystery surrounding the tomb involves the scale of Tiwanaku influence itself. The Tiwanaku civilization flourished roughly between 500 and 1000 CE near Lake Titicaca in modern Bolivia. Yet objects inside the Chirimaya Tuimiya burial displayed unmistakable Tiwanaku characteristics despite being located far from the civilization's core territory. This creates a major problem for archaeologists. Tiwanaku possessed no wheeled transportation for cargo movement and no large domesticated animals like horses or oxen. Despite these limitations, they maintained influence across huge sections of the Andes. Artifacts, religious imagery, textile patterns, and elite burial customs spread through mountain deserts, valleys, and dangerous terrain over distances reaching hundreds of kilometers. Researchers still debate how this system functioned. One theory suggests Tiwanaku established agricultural colonies in distant regions connected through trade and ceremonial alliances. Another theory argues they controlled territory through religion rather than military force, using elite rituals and sacred symbolism to unify different populations. Either explanation implies extraordinary organization. Maintaining influence across such hostile geography without modern infrastructure would have required advanced planning, food distribution systems, and long-distance coordination that many ancient civilizations struggled to achieve. The metal objects buried alongside the woman revealed another layer of technological sophistication. Tiwanaku metalworkers created ceremonial ornaments using copper alloys that required controlled heating techniques and advanced knowledge of metallurgy. Some objects discovered in elite Andean burials are so thin and symmetrical that modern experimental archaeologists struggle to recreate them using ancient tools alone. Researchers found evidence that Andean craftsmen understood how to manipulate alloys by combining copper with arsenic or tin to increase hardness, and alter appearance. Certain ceremonial metals may even have been selected for symbolic colours associated with religious rituals. Unlike Eurasian civilizations that focused heavily on iron production, Andean societies developed highly specialized copper metallurgy adapted to their own environment and cultural needs. The technology followed an entirely different evolutionary path, yet still achieved remarkable precision. Southern Peru lies in one of the most earthquake-prone regions on Earth. Powerful seismic activity has repeatedly destroyed settlements throughout Andean history. Yet the Chirimaya Tuimiya tomb survived for centuries with much of its internal structure intact. Archaeologists believe the builders intentionally designed the burial chamber to resist collapse. Layers of compacted soil, carefully placed stone and organic filler materials may have helped distribute seismic pressure during earthquakes. This is particularly significant because similar earthquake-resistant concepts later appeared in Inca engineering centuries afterward. Massive Inca stone walls famously survived earthquakes that destroyed many colonial Spanish buildings built on top of them. The tomb suggests ancient Andean civilizations had already been experimenting with structural stability long before the rise of the Inca Empire. Several symbols connected to the burial appear linked to one of the most mysterious religious figures in ancient South America, the staff god. This figure appears repeatedly across multiple Andean civilizations separated by centuries and enormous geographic distances. Carvings, textiles, ceramics, and ritual objects depict a supernatural being holding staffs or ceremonial objects in both hands. Researchers still cannot fully explain why this symbol remained so consistent for so long. Some believe the figure represented a sky deity connected to storms, fertility, agriculture, or cosmic order. Others argue it symbolized political authority tied to sacred ritual systems. What makes the mystery even stranger is the mathematical consistency of some geometric patterns surrounding the imagery. Certain textile motifs appear carefully standardized, almost as if they functioned as encoded religious symbols understood across multiple regions. Without a surviving written language, much of the meaning remains permanently lost.